Hello, everyone. Welcome, Harold Brathwaite. Welcome, staff, students, and all of the attendees to the event. Thank you all for your patience. We appreciate it. We are going to get started with our first live event for Sikh Heritage Month. So let's swing right into things. I'm just going to share my screen with you guys. Okay, welcome everyone to our Sikh Heritage Month event presented by Harold Brathwaite Sikh Student Association. Sikh Heritage Month, a little bit of background. April has been proclaimed as Sikh Heritage Month. Thank you to the Sikh Heritage Month Act of 2013 for helping us organize this wonderful month attributed to bringing awareness about Sikhism all around. Sikh Heritage Month is an opportunity to remember, celebrate, and educate future generations about Sikh Canadians and the important role they have played and continue to play in communities across Ontario. Before we begin our presentation today, we'd like to do a land acknowledgement and understand that we meet today on the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation. And it's really important to understand this land acknowledgement to recognize the First Nations who have inhabited the land before us. This act is dedicated to honor the First Nations tribe, Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. And it's important to understand this to help us recognize that we are settlers and people and are not part of the First Nations and Indigenous groups. We are here on their land. How this relates to Sikh Heritage Month. In terms of Sikhism and land acknowledgement, land and water have been an important part of the Sikh identity from the inception of the faith. The Guru Nanak Sahib writes, Asa Ki Ver, which was written and basically means that the water is the root of all life. It gives birth to all living things, including our very bond. From Guru Nanak Sahib's emergence from the waters to the creation of the Khalsa with the Gurbani, Patasa, and Khanda, infused Amrit of Guru Gobind Singh Sahib, water is a transformative medium through which a connection with Waheguru is facilitated. We are people spiritually born from water who are replenished by sarovars and baolis, and who come from Punjab, a land of grain, plentiful resources, and of course water. Punjab literally meaning the land of 5 rivers. To understand Punjab and its tumultuous history, we have to understand the water. It is connected to the rhythms of life, rites of religious passage, and the fight for Sikh sovereignty. Everything in Punjab can be traced back to it. So, myself, Miss Lal, would like to introduce Yuvraj, who will be talking about our guest speaker shortly. Go ahead, Yuvraj.
All right, thank you, Ms. Law, for that beautiful introduction. And first of all, welcome to the Honorable Gurratan Singh. He is our NDP and PP for the Brampton East riding. And Mr. Gurratan Singh, I'd just like to say that you're one of my favorite people in politics right now, personally.
Because thank you so much.
I believe you connect with the youth the most. And so we see your Instagram, your TikToks, and everything that I think everybody here sees about, you know, the pandemic response and auto insurance rates and all that, and you've been a great critic to all of those. So, of course, getting to where you are today was not an easy path in any means, and you know, being a Sikh Canadian, we just want to know your experiences today. So growing up in the 80s and 90s as a Sikh child or teenager, how were your experiences in those days?
Yeah, I really want to appreciate the question. I want to really thank HB for this really amazing online event you're doing. Really powerful introductory comments from Samantha, and Yuvraj, your plug is just on point, brother. Looking really, really fantastic. So thank you for having me. It was tough growing up in the 80s and 90s. I was actually, folks don't know, I was born in Newfoundland, and there's very, very small Sikh community there. And then I grew up, the majority of my youth was spent in Windsor. And in Windsor, I was like the only Sikh kid in school. My brother was 5 years older than me, so he'd experienced a lot of racism. I experienced a lot of racism. And it was tough because people didn't know who we were. They didn't know our values. And we know that when people are ignorant to individuals and they're ignorant toward values and ideas, ultimately that can lead to mistrust, towards hate, towards even violence. And you know, I was picked on a lot. I faced a lot of discrimination because of that. I felt, even when I was young, a lot of anxiety going to school. I was always telling my mom in the morning, you know, my stomach aches every day because I was nervous about going to school and facing those tough situations. And from that, though, my brother really taught me this idea of chardi kala, this idea that in Sikhi, we want to have rising spirits in the face of adversity. My mom shared this with us as a family as well. This is something that he really, as a family, they encouraged me to have a positive outlook and to really embrace positivity to fight negativity. And that gave me a lot of energy, connecting to my roots, celebrating who I am, connecting deeper and understanding the rich heritage we come from, allowed me to have the quite frankly, the motivation to push through the bullying. And instead of focusing on the negativity, celebrate who I am, love who I am, and from that, be the person I am today.
Right, and it's interesting that you mentioned that the ignorance, or the fight that you had to put up for yourself. And it's interesting because as Sikhs, we're taught to be fighting for other people's rights and whatnot. And a lot of people don't realize, especially in our community as well, that we ourselves had to fight for ourselves first before we could do that. And people like yourself have done it yourself. So now, of course, there's a bit of a change in our community, in the overall atmosphere around Sikhs. And how do you feel that change came? And who were the main? Do you believe, like, was it yourself, or who was the one that brought that change?
So I think it's really amazing right now what we're seeing across the world. So when I grew up, you never saw Sikhs in the media. You never saw Sikhs online. Never saw Sikhs. There was no social media back then. There was no really online presence back then. I'm pretty old. I was born in 1984. And so when you grew up, you never saw yourself represented in that way. And I look at the generation now. I look at just like from seeing Jagmeet Singh, my brother being the leader of the federal NDP, and that's a really huge position to be in, to locally, we see Sikhs are very prominent now in different positions. We have Sikhs who are involved in arts and culture. I'm one of the hugest fans of Rupi Kaur. I think she's such a powerful, dynamic woman, born and bred out of Brampton. And the fact she describes how she particularly chose to label her books as Rupi Kaur because she wanted anyone who was a Kaur to know that this book comes from that lineage, comes from that tradition. It's something that all women can share, and specifically to give a connection to all Sikh women who share that last name of Kaur, or that connection with Kaur. So I think it's a different age right now. Sikhs are seen as like style icons and poets and thinkers, and it's really beautiful to see. And it's something that I hope really ultimately gives people the motivation to love themselves more and more, because I think that's at the heart of why it's so cool to have these forms of representation. It gives people the ability to see themselves in a different place, and by doing that, motivates them to aspire to that place.
Right. And I believe you've addressed this in one of your videos as well on Instagram, that, around Brampton, there's a bit of a stereotype because you see like a lot of Sikhs here and a lot of turban wearing people, and that, even in our own youth, there's a little bit of a stereotype around us. Those who live outside of Brampton, they could just kind of, they're kind of ignorant to who we are, and just label us as quote unquote bad drivers, or drunk people, sorry to say. But yeah, so how does that make you feel when you go out somewhere, because you meet so many people in a day?
Yeah, so I guess like online we see it, like be it on Six Buzz or on these different meme pages, like Brampton gets dragged a lot, and it's something that I think is unfair, because when you look at Brampton and when you criticize, or when we give a bad name to Brampton, we have to think of who we're criticizing. We're criticizing a city full of such beautiful, diverse communities from the Sikh background, Caribbean background, African, Indian, across the board. We have Muslims, Hindus, Christians, Sikhs. We have so many religions, so much diversity, but we're also a community that's marginalized. What that means is we're a community that doesn't get its fair share. We have one hospital for over 600,000 people. We're not getting our funding and support for different forms of social services. We don't have a university. So we have a lot of disadvantages, but we're criticized a lot for the fact that we have these disadvantages in a way that blames Bramptonians. And I think it's wrong, because it's not accurate to the reality of Brampton. And also I think it's disrespectful to the fact that we're a beautiful, dynamic city full of people who face a lot of adversity and continue to face adversity. So I think we need to be proud of who we are, and we need to be proud of our city as well. I'm raising my daughter, my family in Brampton, and I'm very, very proud to be living in this beautiful city.
Right, excellent. And building from your point that we don't have a university, you yourself attended, I believe, McMaster, and then went on to the Osgoode Law School, right? And so that that time period in your life, how many how many Sikhs or other marginalized communities did you see on the same path as you, like becoming a lawyer? Like what was the atmosphere there?
Yeah, it's really cool. So I love my time at McMaster University. It was really, really interesting. I actually did an undergraduate in religion. So that was actually the focus of my 4 years honors degree. And I did a really deep dive into Eastern spirituality. So I studied Sikh, Buddhism, Jainism, Hinduism. I really focused on all those traditions. And then after that, I went into law school at Osgoode. And in McMaster, there was a really vibrant community of a bunch of different communities that I connect with regularly. I remember going to Onam, which was an event celebrating different periods of the year for the South Indian community, the Malayalam community specifically. We'd go to different iftar events for the Muslim community. We go to different Hindu events for the Hindu community. There's a lot of unity. But when you do see in law school, all of a sudden there's a big gap. There was a lot less representation. There's less people of color. My brother was like the first person to wear a turban to graduate, I believe, from Osgoode Hall Law School back in 2005 when he graduated. I must have been like the third or fourth. There weren't that many people after me. So there's a big issue of representation. I think that's why it's important that we continue to encourage folks to strive to make sure that they're living their best lives and really hoping to chase their dreams, because by aspiring to be better, we lift those up around us.
Right. And that's a really important thing right now. Like personally speaking to our community, like many of us don't have not good role models, but we don't see ourselves in those positions. So that goes for the same as for our Black community or West Indian community, that we don't see people similar to us in those positions, and therefore some people get pushed towards going into like short selling themselves into things that they're not meant for. They could be much more. So what do you think that like change doesn't come from just one person? Like Yuvraj can't just change something alone, Gurratan can't change something alone. What do you think our community needs to do different about ourselves to make us go to the next level now?
So I think a big part of it is two things. So we have a personal and community responsibility, but then also government has a responsibility to provide cities with the opportunity. So in Brampton, I think sometimes we look at why people are being left behind. There's direct connections between ability for people to access a local university, or the ability for people to access healthcare in a way that they're not going to be nervous about long wait times or being treated in a hallway. The ability to live in your community and go to work in your community, or live in your community and go to school in your community. These are all what we call our social determinants, right? So when you have these access to these things like good schools, good hospitals, universities, good jobs, it actually gives a better standard of living for everyone in that city. Brampton has been left behind. We are a city that doesn't, like, if you look at it comparatively for the amount we give in terms of taxes and support, we don't get that in return of investment in our city. And I think a lot of what Brampton is being left behind with is the fact we don't get that kind of investment in those social services. So I look at like Brampton East, the riding that I represent. For the longest time, there was no community center, right? Like I remember, before Gore Meadows opened up, that whole area had no local community center. If you live in a community where you can't easily access a community center, you can't easily access a library, you can't easily access books or a place to study, that actually is going to impact your ability to succeed in life. So I think we need to look at both levels. We have to understand we personally have a responsibility, but also we have to fight to make sure our city gets the investment in the kind of resources we need to make sure we have a world-class city with world-class services.
Right. And how's that fight going in Queen's Park? Like when you raise such issues, do people present there, if you're not comfortable speaking about it, of course, that's fine. But, do people kind of, just kind of deter you away that, no, it's just a brown people city, don't, be bringing your issues here? Is it hard? Do you believe it's harder for you to bring issues up than, let's say, your counterpart from another riding?
I think the reality is it's more so has to do with the fact that, and I'll just be honest, like this is my job, right? So past liberal and conservative governments haven't invested in Brampton. And every time we fight for the investment into our city, what we instead get is fake promises, false promises, and like, you know, this whole thing. I've been very vocal on social media about the fact that, you know, they said we're getting a new hospital in Brampton. When I looked at the details, there's no hospital. It's an election promise for 2023, which is after the next election in 2022. So I think the reality is that we have to keep on fighting. We have to never lose hope. But the history of these past governments has always been leaving Brampton behind. And I think we need to just, you know, make different decisions in who we put into government.
Right. And so, okay, I don't want to get too political here, but, you know, how's the future for, do you believe, NDP looking? Do you think like the NDP will come into like provincial power, or is it not something? Because, you know, the NDP, like politically, like Canada knows it as the social conscience of Canada, you know, the kind of the guiding factor. Will you ever become the governing factor, do you believe?
You know, I'm a big believer that we need to fight to make sure we have a better province. And I joined this party because I think this party is one that's going to provide Ontarians with the things that they need, and better healthcare, better education, and better services across the board. So I'm always fighting to get into a position where we can implement those policies. So I'm a believer that you know, it's more impactful to help more people if we can get the NDP elected into government, and that's something that you know, I'm going to keep on fighting for, and hopefully the people of Ontario give us that honor. Right.
All right. So now backtracking from political to more of a Sikh standpoint again. So right now, a lot is going on in the world, like with Sikhs, especially at the moment. If the farmers protest, it's not necessarily a Sikh thing; it's a whole farmers thing. But, you know, since we're so vibrantly visible from the crowd, we're kind of, you know, highlighted, picked out of it. And then now recently there's been a shooting in Indianapolis, and most of the victims there were Sikhs. And from that actual shooting, a statistic came out that Sikhs are the third most targeted religious community in the United States. So we've come such a far way, but we still have a far way to go. So kind of, again, how do you think we can like change the atmosphere around us? Like, how can we make people believe that we're not some, you know, foreign monster? We are Canadians, we are Americans, and we're part of the community, not an enemy to be fought.
Yeah, so it's really an interesting conversation, and we have to recognize that the dynamic in America, their history of gun violence and their history of mass shootings, which is tragic and unjust, is something which is has a lot of factors that result to it and cause it, right? And people have made the connections between gun violence and mental health, because when you don't have a public health care service, if people are you know, unwell and they don't have that ability to get that kind of support, it can lead towards, you know, ultimately negative responses or negative results. People have made the connection between having you know, more social services and having less violence across the board. So it's really, in America, like the whole issue of gun violence is something which is you know, it's something that you need to understand it from an American lens and the issues that result into it. So I'll talk about just in general then, you know, the situation of Sikhs and how we can fight ignorance and how we can fight racism and fight violence. And, you know, I was around also, you know, I went to actually Oak Creek. Folks may not know, but Oak Creek was at the time, I think, one of the largest mass shootings in the history of America in a religious location, and is where a variety of Sikhs were shot and killed in a gurdwara in Oak Creek, Wisconsin. And actually, I attended the funeral because it was something that shook us all across North America, across the world, really. And I think that aside from the policies that we need to bring in place, or America needs to bring in place to address gun violence as a whole, which is, you know, should be done through obviously stricter measures around people's ability to access guns and bring in more services to help people out so they don't, you know, go down that path of gun violence. I think we need to create more awareness about our values, our ideas, our concepts, and we need to build more solidarity with other communities who face violence. So I think Sikhs, and I think Sikhs in America have done a good job about this, of standing side by side with Muslims when they face Islamophobia, or other racialized communities when they face discrimination. We need to understand that violence towards one of us is violence towards all of us, because ultimately in Sikhi, we believe in oneness. We believe that we're all one. We're all connected by this one energy, that the love that we experience between us is our, how we define God, is how we define our divine. And so I think we need to embody that and continue that by making sure we don't just fight for justice for Sikhs, but we fight for justice for all communities who face oppression.
Right. And so is there any like personal experience yourself that you like to share, or you think that, really kind of changed the way you look at things? Like I personally have went through something like just based upon like some discrimination that you faced as a Sikh that you think has changed you.
So you cut out that last part. You said you went through.
Oh yeah, so I was saying that, do you have any experience that you'd like to share that you faced discrimination that you think has changed you, or changed your lens on how the world is today? If you're comfortable.
I think in terms of my experiences, my personal experiences, and how it's impacted my understanding of Sikhi, I think it was a lot to do with my upbringing. And I think when you grow up facing tough times, and you grow up, so I grew up, facing a lot of bullying. A lot of my brother's written about this openly, but my father was really had a lot of issues with alcoholism growing up. He's better now, but he struggled with it. So I grew up in a household with a lot of it was a tough upbringing. It was so bad that when I was 15, I couldn't stay at home anymore because the situation was so tough with my dad's disease that actually I moved out, and I moved in with my brother, who was 20 at the time. He was in third year university at Western. So I was, my brother all of a sudden became my guardian. My brother's, helping me make lunch and helping with my homework, and it was just me and him who lived in a condo together in London, Ontario. And through all those situations, I got to get a glimpse of, and people go through a lot worse, but I got to see a glimpse of what people go through and the negativity that people experience in their lives, be it insecurity at home when you have someone who's struggling with addiction or mental health issues, when you have people, economic insecurity. When my dad got really sick, we got into a really tough place economically, and we were struggling to pay the bills. I got to experience what it's like to be a victim of a lot of bullying and the anxiety it created within me. And when you experience those feelings, but you also understand that we're all one, that we're all connected, that it's not just to say we're all one, but the Sikh spiritual goal is to experience we're all one, to see that you and I, Yuvraj, are one, that even myself and the environment, me and the plants, the earth, a quote was given beforehand, but in Sikh you say, Baban Guru Pani Pata Mata Tarf Mahat, the Guru is the air, the Father is the water, the Mother is the great earth. We're connected with everything in Sikhi. So because I experienced these negative issues and these negative experiences, and if I really want to aspire to understand oneness, I never want others to experience that kind of injustice, others to experience even the little I experienced, or even far more. So going through those situations have made me sensitive to it. And now I think I really want to fight to create a world where others don't have to face those kind of barriers. And the way we do that, I think, is through government. Government has a really important role in giving people services and support, in investing in schools and education, and giving people the help they need, even through mental health support, that we can create a more just world. So my experiencing some tough times has now motivated, and believing and trying to experience oneness now wants me to make sure that no one else has to experience these tough times.
Right, and that's a good problem that you've mentioned, like alcoholism or drug abuse. Like even though Sikhs aren't supposed to, indulge in any such activities, it's become like a prominent issue, especially in immigrant communities when we come, out of Punjab into, England, Canada, America, wherever it may be. And so it's something that stays bottled up in a lot of homes, like and then it's not addressed. So do you believe that there needs to be like I think you already said that we all need to unite as one and kind of face these problems together. So does the Sikh community need to work together to make like a output, some type of place that they could come to get help for such problems? Like, is the Gurratan supposed to be something of sort, or like do we need to create something else?
Yeah, so I think it's really important to first acknowledge that like we have a problem in our community, and I think there's some beautiful parts of our culture, and then there's some parts of our culture that we need to reflect on. And I think there's this idea of sharam sometimes in our community. Loki ki kehnge, we say in Punjabi, right? And I think it can result in us hiding or avoiding or ignoring the fact that we have this big issue of addiction in our community. And I give this example all the time, and it's a personal experience. So when I got married and I had my reception, I didn't have any alcohol because alcohol had a really terrible experience in my family. And despite that, my friends, people who I have love, I have a lot of love for, they did this thing that happens a lot called car barring. So they brought all the alcohol, they put it in their trunks, and they're drinking secretly and coming back. And afterwards, they would laugh and say, "Gurratan, no, I know you had no alcohol, but we had, we drank in our, or back of our cars or whatever." And I would reflect on that, and I think, like, my family has gone through addiction. Like, these are people who know my family experiences, but despite that, this culture of drinking is so pervasive. It's so just like everywhere in our community. Even then, there's this social pressure that they felt that they had to drink because it's a festive time. Right. And I think that contributes to a culture in which we create further celebration around alcoholism, and we also forget the fact, the negative impacts that it has. And I think that, to me, really demonstrated how that person didn't mean ill. They didn't want to hurt me, but there's just this culture of drinking so pervasive in our community that they still did it, despite the fact that I'm someone who's, my family was almost destroyed because of alcoholism. So I think we need to reflect on it. I think we need to have some serious conversations in the community. And I do think we need a culturally and even a spiritually relevant way of addressing this issue. I think we need to look at, turn to our culture and our roots. And I know my dad ultimately, he got better when he started to connect to who he was, when he started to connect to his traditions and to Sikhi and to his health and to his identity. That helped him get better. And I think we need to facilitate those kind of ways of people getting better when they deal with alcoholism.
Right. And that's why I think that, when Sikhism was being created, when the Guru Granth Sahib was all compiled together, and then this was an important concept that was made, not to be ever under the influence of something or any type of drug, let alone alcohol. And so this is an important concept. What do you believe? Like, what do you think is the most important concept to you?
In Sikhi.
In Sikhi, yes.
Yeah. So I think there's something that we don't talk about enough in Sikhi, and I've been making a bit of reference to a bit of it now. But like in Sikhi, we have a really unique worldview, and for us, God is not someone who is a guy with a long white beard sitting in the sky or in the heavens. We believe God is the love that we experience between one another. We believe the love and the connection between ourselves and everyone, between me and you, Yuvraj, between us and the plants and the earth, between us and animals, between everything in existence. That is our belief of the divine. That's our belief in God, the oneness. We often say, for those who are Star Wars fans, I'm a big Star Wars fan. I don't know if you watch Star Wars at all, but the Force, this idea of this energy that connects us all. For those sci-fi fans out there, I don't know if there are any, but I'm a bit of a nerd. But this idea that we're all connected with this energy, and this idea of oneness is not enough just to say we as Sikhs want to say that we're one, but we actually want to experience that we're one. And we give the example of, like, drops of water to the ocean is our soul to the divine, right? We give the example of the waves. Like, I think this is a really good metaphor to explaining how, when you see an ocean, you sit on a beach and you see these waves coming out. These waves look distinct. They look separate, and they exist for a brief period of time, only to crash upon the beach and to go back into the ocean. In the same way, that's kind of a metaphor of who we are. Like, we are but waves that are here for a brief period of time, but we're still part of the ocean. We think we're separate, but ultimately we're going to crash into the beach and merge back into this ocean. And that's a way of explaining how we are one with this universal energy. Or, the last metaphor I'll share is this idea of someone told me the story of, a piece of salt wanted to understand the ocean. The piece of salt wanted to go deeper and deeper. And as the piece of salt swam deeper into the ocean, the salt dissolved until it only became one with the ocean. There was no more salt, just the ocean. In the same way, we want to understand this concept of love so deeply that we lose ourselves and become absorbed in this love. So I think this idea of oneness is something which is beautiful. It's unique to who we are. It really shapes our world view of how we exist and our connection with the earth, the land, with one another. And even for me growing up, realizing that even my dad, who was suffering so badly from the sickness, who was someone who had gone through so much pain and created a lot of pain in our household, I was still one with him. And that allowed me to forgive him. That allowed me to love him. That allowed me to realize my own weaknesses that I have myself are manifested in him. And likewise, like we have this interconnectedness. So I think oneness is something we don't talk enough about a community. We talk a lot about social justice. We talk a lot about fighting against injustice, but we have to understand that this belief in fighting against injustice is founded in this belief that we're all one. Because if we're all one, injustice to someone else is an injustice to us all. Injustice to the farmers in India, Muslim, Sikh, Hindu, or otherwise, is injustice towards all of us. When we say Black Lives Matter, we as Sikhs should say it as well, because we have to recognize that injustice towards the Black community is injustice towards our community as well. So we have to understand this oneness. When Indigenous communities don't have access to clean drinking water up north in Northern Ontario, in our province, that is an injustice towards us as well. And we need to equally be active there as well. So oneness is something which is really powerful, and it's something as a community we need to talk about more.
That was a beautiful analogy that you made with the ocean and the soul and crashing onto the beach and becoming all one. So that was great. And so, you know, from moving on from there, like personally as a turban tying Sikh, just carrying this, you know, personality, carrying the turban, it's a bit of a big responsibility. You know, you try to act in ways that you don't bring, you know, shame to the community and whatnot. You know, you try to stay conservative in many ways. And so you're a Sikh tying person, you're Orthodox Sikh, and you know you're also a leader in our community. So you know, what inspires you to keep going forward as a leader with not only the responsibility of such a big riding on you, but being, you know, a visible Sikh? Like, what keeps you going every day, and what advice would you give?
I think it's a few things. We have to understand that even like this, you know, we're all Sikhs. Sikhs means students, right? And this idea of like Orthodox or moderate, I just think we're all Sikhs. We're all one, right? And I look at you as my brother and as a Sikh, and anyone who identifies as a Sikh to me is a Sikh. And so I don't look at this distinction too much between, you know, an Orthodox or moderate. I just think, you know, we're all on this path. And when we accept oneness, we have to understand that people are on this path in different ways, and they experience this path and they evolve in this path towards understanding oneness, to understand our connectedness at different stages. And I think we need to, as Sikhs, not judge, but support one another. And I think for me as a Sikh, you are right, though, when you do wear these articles and you wear the star, when you carry yourself in this fashion, Sikhs do have a responsibility, and it's something by design, right? Like when we just celebrated Vaisakhi, Khalsa Sajan Diwas, just you know, a week ago or a couple of days ago, and that was created in a way where the downtrodden, oppressed people who were told that only kings and queens can wear turbans, and instead everyone is given a turban during Vaisakhi as a way to say each and every one of you is divine, each and every one of you is royal, each and one of you is a king and a queen. You know, each Sikh at that time was given, you know, empowered and given the motivation, the energy to say that we will turn sparrows into hawks or to falcons, who will have the ability to fight and in combat, you know, 125,000, because they'll be filled with such love and such motivation. As Sikhs, we are ambassadors, and when we wear the suroop, when we wear the way we look, it's supposed to be a flag for our beliefs. And what are our beliefs? Our beliefs are radical equality. Our beliefs are the opposition to any form of sexism or gender discrimination. Our beliefs are ones who will stand up for justice for all communities. Our beliefs are ones who will accept and embrace all communities. You know, Sikhs, we don't believe ever in the world needs to be a Sikh. We accept the diversity, and we celebrate and we encourage. If you're a Hindu, be a good Hindu. If you're a Muslim, be a good Muslim. If you're a Sikh, be a good Sikh. So when you see this image, it's something that is supposed to be an image that encourages us to aspire to be better and to not just think of ourselves, but think of our community and all communities. So it is a responsibility, but I don't think it's something that should be prohibitive. I think sometimes people think, oh, you know, I can't handle that. I think we also have to not judge one another and accept that we're on different paths. And along that path, we'll have different experiences, and that's life. That's beautiful.
And all right, so I'll ask one last question before we open it up to the rest of the audience for some question and answer. If there's any
You're
questions,
Raj, you're doing a fantastic job. Let me just say that.
thank you.
Like, what grade are you?
12.
Yo, you are like great. You are just knocking it out of the park right now. You're a really good interviewer. You're asking great questions. You have great engagement. So shout out to you, Raj. I think I may be knocking doors for you in the future because you have the future of a community leader in you.
Thank you. I had to interview on TV myself, so some background there as to how to keep the interviewee engaged.
That's great, man.
And so yeah, so my last question to you would be that what advice would you give to somebody that's trying to become like you, trying to become a community leader, trying to get to Queen's Park, trying to maybe get to the federal house? So what do you think some advice that you give?
I really think you should join politics if you have a want and a need to fight to create a better world. And I started off in community organizing. Way back in the day, we would hold these big events, these big concerts, these shows around human rights. We did these events back in the day called When Lions Roar, and they're super cool because like on our stage, this is way back in the day, but like before they were huge, Just Rain, Fateh, Lily, all these people used to perform at these open mics, these big concerts we would hold. This is before your time. This is like 2009 to 2013. So, quite a while ago. And it was through organizing the community, I got to experience and understand the issues that are facing our Sikh community. But then that also got to show me the connectedness between our issues and other communities. And that made me say, you know what, the reality is you live in Brampton, doesn't matter what your background is. If you have a broken healthcare system, that impacts everyone. Sikh, Hindu, Muslim, Black, white, brown, doesn't matter. And so it then encouraged me and motivated me to want to fight to help all communities and to make sure that was a part of my work. So I think my biggest advice are two things. Get involved right now. Make sure you're getting involved. And this is something a part of the NDP as well, right? Like we're a party of social justice. And I think we need to make social justice a central part of our work and our lives. Even amongst my friends, like literally the way I hang out with my friends is we organize around social justice issues. Like our conversations are about creating a better world or improving ourselves or improving our community. So I think we need to make social justice central to our lives. And also people don't realize like you can get involved. Like I would love to have you, Raj, and anyone else to get involved with my office. And it's an opportunity where you can learn about politics, see it firsthand, even digitally, like we've learned to adapt digitally. So you have to understand you have this opportunity before you if you need volunteer hours or you just want to, like politicians want you involved. So you have an opportunity to get involved. Why not take it?
I'll definitely take you up on that offer then.
That'd be great.
Thanks. All right, so Ms. Lal, if you could just jump in and start that Q&A for us.
Yes, absolutely. Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you so much to Gurratan for taking the time and speaking with our students today. And Yuvraj, just like Gurratan said, you did an amazing job moderating the event. So thank you. Yeah, you definitely do have a future career in community leadership or politics. Wonderful. Thank you so much. You answered many of the questions, Gurratan, that the students had pre-asked. So that was wonderful. Thank you for doing that. We have some questions in the live Q&A that I'll just read out loud, Gurratan, for you. The first question one of the students has is, what is the primary goal that you hope to accomplish in your career?
Oh, wow. That's a really amazing, really amazing question. So I say this all the time. I have three goals right now. I want to fight to create a world and a Canada where people have access to the things they need to be their best selves. And to me, directly, I'm really working hard to get Jagmeet Singh elected as the Prime Minister of Canada, Andrew Horwath elected as the Premier of Ontario, and I've been recently saying Wap Kanu, an Indigenous First Nation leader of Manitoba, to be elected there. And the reason why is because I want to create a world where people have access to the medicine they need when they're sick, when people have access to the schools that are amazing and local to their community. I want to make sure that people in Brampton and across Ontario can go to a hospital that is well-funded and doesn't have huge wait lines. I want to make sure our schools, our amazing public institutions, our public schools are strengthened, are expanded, that there's no cuts to our schools, because we don't realize how amazing Canada is because of the teachers you have right now on this call and because of our public school system, which allows anyone from every different economic background get access to a world-class education. So I want to create a world in my career. I'd be very happy to see a Canada that has these strong social services, that has stronger schools, stronger hospitals, and stronger communities. And that's something I want to be a part of.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Wonderful goals there. And I hope that, and we're so happy that we're part of that as well. The next question from a student is, do you believe that Sikhs involved in social media, such as Just Rain and Lily Singh, have helped our community?
I think it's definitely, like, for me growing up, I didn't have that kind of representation. And you can't hold them to the same standard as, like, they're all human beings, right? That whole idea of, like, we can't judge people and judge them to be perfect Sikhs or perfect this or that. But I think growing up, having that representation is beautiful. And I think we need to embrace them and love all these people who are doing such fantastic jobs, and recognize that, you know, they are people who are in their specific fields, and you know, it's they obviously have to, you know, work accordingly to that field. But I think it's a huge benefit to our entire community. And I think it's really created a world where young women and men now see themselves represented in huge things, like, you know, Lily Singh being this dynamic figure on social media and on TV, and artists. Just, I think they've done a fantastic job, and I think we need to encourage it.
Absolutely, I agree. And I know, to your point there about, you know, growing up and seeing ourselves represented in media is so important. I know you mentioned you have a baby, and I know I do as well. So for me, that's important as a parent, as a teacher, and sort of every hat that I wear in life. It's so important to have these people represented. So it's nice that we can see that today. Thank you. I'm just going to take a look here. Those are all the live Q&A questions. If there are any final questions, ladies and gentlemen of HB, please feel free to take a moment and ask Gurratan in the Q&A. I'll be happy to send those questions over. I know everyone's time here is very valuable. So again, thank you for everyone for hanging in there. And, you know, Gurratan, again, thank you for taking the time to speak to our students. It was very empowering and really nice to hear from a community leader making such a big positive impact, and a really nice way to launch our Sikh Heritage Month panelist discussion. I'll give the students maybe a few more quick seconds if there are any questions. Otherwise, I think we're all good to shortly wrap up, Gurratan. So if we just have any final remarks that you'd like to make, we'll be happy to take those.
Yeah, it's something that so there's a few things I'm going to end with. The first thing is this: Sikh Heritage Month, I want us to all make a commitment. And our commitment is to say our names correctly. And I think that's a really important commitment. We actually saw, you can go online and see, Neetu Garcha is an online personality in BC. And she recently did this viral video. It's like hundreds of thousands of views, where she said, I'm no longer Neetu Garcha, I'm Neetu Garcha. Because our names have power, our names have strength, our names connect us to who we are. So growing up, I'll share a quick story. My dad actually gave myself and my brother, he gave us Western names. So, you know, my name was actually Gary Gurratan Singh, and my brother's name was Jimmy Jagmeet Singh. Our last name was Paliwal, but we don't use Paliwal anymore. We use Singh because we want to embrace. We don't want to celebrate the caste system, so we focus on Singh as our last names. And Gary didn't connect me to my roots or to my culture, to who I am, or to you know, my Sikhi. Gurratan means the jewel of the bringer of light into darkness, the jewel of the Guru. Jagmeet means the friend of the world, right? Yuvraj, Yuvraj.
Prince.
Say it again?
Prince.
Prince, yes, Raj is Prince. And our names are so powerful, and they have such a connection to who we are and to our culture and roots. But if we say it incorrectly, we lose that connection. So if someone's name is, you know, Japamanajit. Japamanajit's a beautiful name, which means the mind which meditates and is victorious because of it. The victorious mind through meditation. But Japmanjit doesn't mean that. And so it's so important in this Sikh Heritage Month. I want each and every one of us to take a commitment to say our names correctly, and also encourage your friends from other backgrounds to say their names correctly. You know, Muhammad, not Muhammad, or you know, whatever the backgrounds are. If we have names that are, you know, Ravi instead of Ravi, like, there's such beautiful names that we can celebrate, and we should be really encouraging that amongst ourselves. So that's one thing I want to share. And the last thing I want to just talk about, I've been saying a lot recently, is this idea of oneness. And it's just really important to understand that in Sikhi, we have this dynamic, different view of the world. And it's something that I want to encourage you all to try to go home and ask your parents about, or Google about, or search about, and understand, or try to start looking to this idea of oneness. Because when we start looking at the Sikh view of oneness, we understand that we look at the world differently. And even when we die, when we pass physically from this world, we may come back to this world. And that's why we have to understand that, you know, if we leave this world in a terrible state, ultimately it's not going to just impact ourselves right now or our families, but it'll impact us directly again, because we are one with this world. We are one with the universe. So I want us to really encourage and start celebrating this idea of oneness and thinking about it more and more, because from it come this radical belief in equality, this radical belief in standing up for justice for all communities, and this really, you know, deep belief of loving ourselves and loving others. And I think oneness is the best way to do that. So let's all celebrate oneness.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Gurratan Singh, for everything you've said and taking out your time to come talk to us here today. If I could just ask you to stay back for like 2 minutes, if that's all right. And Ms. Law, and thank you to all the attendees that have attended our live event today. We'll be back on Wednesday with another panelist meeting for you. So thank you, everyone, and have a nice rest of your day.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Thank you. Thank you, Gurratan. Appreciate your time. And thank you to all the staff and students who attended our live event today. We appreciate it. And again, like Yuvraj said, we'll see you all on Wednesday. Thank you.
All right.